Alright, YouTube, we are back. We're talking some Final Fantasy VIII, something we don't get to talk about enough on the channel. There's a recent interview with VGC and Ben Starr, aka Clive Rosfield, aka John Balatro. It's like a clip, I believe, from a longer video, like a 45-minute video from their Patreon, where he talks about kind of his career, Expedition 33, the upcoming Final Fantasy tactics, and it's brought up about the potential or possibility of a Final Fantasy VIII remake, which Ben actually shoots down. He mentions multiple times that he doesn't think it'll be remade, but he also says he doesn't think it needs to be remade, which is something that I kind of disagree with. Let's go ahead and play the clip really quickly, and then, of course, we'll talk about it.
They've announced tactics. It feels like they're running down the line of all the stuff that people are desperate to see. I'm not going to ask you about 8, but you think people would be very happy about that?
Yeah, but it isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, like I feel like I have to put a pin in that. Final Fantasy VIII is never going to be remade.
So we talked about this on the podcast when we did it from London, and we get comments on that every 2 days talking about the prospect of that game.
Yeah, I love the thought exercise because I think it's a really beloved game, and I love how many people come and say that. I just don't think it's ever going to be remade. I also don't think it needs to be.
Yeah,
I don't think it needs to be remade. I know. More people who love that game want people to play it in that spirit, but it doesn't matter. Like, you've got that love. We don't need to remake it. Let's make new stuff. Let's make new games that inspire people like Final Fantasy VIII did.
The last bit I can definitely agree with. Like, I do want, plenty of games out there to be remade, of course. But obviously, like, newer games is something that we want. Otherwise, like, what are we doing with the industry, right? We want to push the industry forward, create new stuff. I can agree with that, of course. Now, on the topic of whether or not Final Fantasy VIII needs a remake, I think it kind of does. Like, there's definitely mechanics in the game that I don't think are the best. I'm not a big fan of the draw system and the junction system. I think there's an idea there that's good, but I just don't particularly like it. Especially don't like that you draw magic and draw things from enemies, and then you don't have like a magic stat. You don't have like MP, right? You just use from like the magic you draw from something, and like that. Throughout my entire life of playing the game, I just never really used magic in the game outside of like stuff that like boosts like your damage or weakens enemies or something like that, like the non damaging attacks. Like a lot of times I don't want to use those because it's gonna make me weaker. Like I have this particular magic junction to this particular stat. If I use this magic, my stat goes down. Like why would I want to use it? It's like some sort of like conflicting thing there, right? Where it doesn't make me want to use the magic in the game. I'm pretty much just physically attacking throughout the entire game, with the occasional use of like meltdown or aura or whatever else. If you were to do a remake of Final Fantasy VIII, I don't really know how you like alter it or something because you still want to keep the draw system and the junction system. That's a big part of what makes Final Fantasy VIII. But I don't know how you compel somebody to want to use the magic outside of just adding an MP stat and a cost for each magic, right? But moving away from the draw and junction system, you also have the fact that enemies scale with you to a certain degree. I think they can be like 4/5 of your level, or I think sometimes like 6/5 of your level, so technically like a little bit higher than you. And that's not something that's widely liked when it comes to RPGs or really games in general. Like not everybody likes enemies scaling with you. Don't necessarily hate it all the time. I think it's fine in certain games. That way there's always like a challenge, right? But it's definitely something that I didn't know about for a good portion of my life. Like playing Final Fantasy VIII as a kid and like maybe up into like preteens and shit. I didn't know that shit. I just thought this was a really fucking hard game. I didn't realize that my grinding didn't really matter that much because the enemies are kind of sticking with you as you level up. But also in that regard, it does promote low-level playthroughs, but it also allows you to break the shit out of the game, right? If you stay as low level as possible until you learn all of your Guardian Forces abilities, like Strength bonus and all those other stat bonus abilities, and you can make your characters insanely fucking strong to where there's not even a bit of a challenge in the game. Whether or not that's a positive or a negative will differ from person to person. I don't necessarily care one way or the other. Like because you don't have to do it. Like there's no reason you have to stay low level if you don't want to, right? There's no reason you have to like break the game. So like the option being there is kind of nice, and again, like the option to do like a low level playthrough is pretty interesting. That's kind of the main point is that enemy scaling with you is not very popular. It's not something that a lot of people like when it comes to Final Fantasy VIII. When it comes to the discussion of a Final Fantasy VIII remake, the story of Final Fantasy VIII I think is great. There's a fantastic story there, and it's for the most part told good. It's not told great. They don't necessarily explain everything in the best way they can, right? In terms of like Guardian Forces and like forgetting shit, because if you're not like super paying attention to the story, I don't even know how often in the story, if at all, they actually talk about Guardian Forces making you forget shit. You learn about that for sure in like the menus and shit when you're reading around, like at the school or maybe even the menu when you hit pause and shit. But like it sort of seems to come out of nowhere whenever you learn that like all these people you've been traveling with in your party like grew up together and they just all kind of forgot it. So the sorceress, or at least the first one you deal with, Sorceress Adea, was their matron. They like helped raise them when they were kids. I also have like the kind of like jumping through time stuff with Alone or Elena, however you say her name, and like the Laguna backstory stuff and like time compression itself and Ultimecia, and like there's aspects of the story that could be explained better. I certainly understand it these days, but you know, definitely the first few times I played through FF8, I was a little bit confused. I didn't like, it's not like I was completely lost, but it's just for the average person playing the game, especially if you're playing it for the first time, there's a lot that's just going to be like, what the fuck is happening? And that's something you could definitely benefit from with a remake, where they can maybe explain some stuff a little bit better. Also, I'm just going to throw this out there, and this really comes down to what kind of a remake it would be. But when it came to like the original version, the original concept for Final Fantasy VIII, there was going to be a lot more Laguna stuff, to the point that like there would be a world to explore, an overworld, when you're playing as Laguna. It wasn't just these like little tiny segments that you play as, right? Where you could actually explore the world and shit with Laguna and Ward and Kyros and shit. And that would have been fucking cool, man. So if you were to do like a full-scale remake, I would definitely like to see like the cut content type of shit, right? Like more Laguna for sure. If you're somebody that's playing the game for the first time and you have this somewhat convoluted story, but also these convoluted mechanics with the drawing and the junctioning and stuff like that, but also the enemies that, you know, scale with you, so it's like it feels like your level grinding doesn't matter. You may not be aware of the fact that they're leveling with you. Like it doesn't give off the best impression the first time. Like I definitely was put off by it the first time I played it, and then eventually I kind of did more playthroughs and fell in love with the game the more I played it, really. And actually, I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm not a big fan of the equipment system in the game, because they forego, you know, armors and accessories and things like that because of the junction system. That's how you raise your stats. I can sort of forgive that because that's the mechanic of the game, but also in general, I'm not a fan of the weapon system. How you don't really change weapons too often, and you just kind of craft weapons. Like I don't mind a crafting system. That's kind of interesting, right? Like finding magazines to be able to craft weapons. There's something interesting there, but like, I don't know. I'm just like, I'm kind of a classic RPG fan where I love getting to the next town and like hitting the fucking store and buying, you know, new gear for my characters. And that's just not something you can do in that game. Overall, I do think there's a great game here. I think Final Fantasy VIII is a great game. You can definitely buy the fucking HD remaster on, you know, any platform these days and still have a great time with it. There's nothing wrong with the game, so to speak. But it could certainly benefit from a remake, in my opinion. To go back to what Ben Starr said about it never being remade, I don't think that's true. Like, for one, he can't possibly know that. I doubt, unless they cue him in on every goddamn thing that they're doing at Square Enix, he has no idea if that's something they want to do. But also, if they were potentially working on that and he's somehow aware of it, he would obviously not want to make that public. He'd try to throw people off the scent or whatever. But also, it kind of depends on what remake we're talking about, right? Like, what say they would never do a remake, I think, is probably not true, just because, like, they could remake it, like, visually, right? Like, just kind of give it a really good graphical overhaul, and then maybe add voice acting, like we're seeing with the upcoming Tactics, you know, remaster, remake, whatever you want to call that shit, the Ivalice Chronicles. Like, you could simply, like, visually enhance FF8, like, to the point of something like the Memorial Project or something like that. Maybe not so cartoony, but that kind of idea. And then add voice acting to it, and I'd be fine with that, to be honest. I'd pay for that shit. Would they ever do, like, a full-scale remake? I don't think they would. Like, something like the VII Remake project, where you're completely overhauling the game, redoing it from the ground up, modernizing it, fleshing out locations in the world and things like that. I don't know. But at the same time, if you could maybe incorporate what they're doing with VII Remake, at least like world scale, and you could just like, you know, change the assets around to be FF8, maybe that's a possibility. That's an idea. I don't know. But I just don't know that they would ever do like a big project like this that takes, you know, several years, a trilogy or more of, you know, games to complete a remake. But at the same time, I'm all for that shit. I know not everybody is. Not everybody wants to wait, you know, years between games. But dude, if that's what 9 Remake is or ends up being or whatever, I don't hate the idea of it. If you give me like a full-scale remake, I'll pay for a visual remake that maybe overhauls shit in the game or whatever. I'm here for that shit too. But if you're doing like a 7 remake thing with like 9 and, you know, maybe 8 in the future down the line at some point or whatever, I'm there, dude. I'm for that shit. I know not everybody likes remakes and kind of have remake fatigue and shit. But dude, I'm all about nostalgia bait. Like, if you're remaking a game that I enjoyed growing up, I'm there to buy it. I'm there to play that shit, dude. So like, you can keep giving me remakes forever. I will love that shit. But of course, that's where I pass off to you guys. What are your thoughts on Final Fantasy VIII in a theoretical remake? What kind of remake would you like to see? Would you want to see it remade? Do you think it needs a remake? What are your thoughts on Ben Starr saying that it will never be remade or that it doesn't need a remake? Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to if you guys are new. Just network in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @VIIT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.